So here we are today. It's interesting, these last months have certainly been certainly in a certain way different. We seem to be, no matter what the original topic was, we seem to be very much responding to significant shifts and changes that are going on in our society. A couple of months ago, for many months, it was the virus. That seems to, even though it's still very present and real, that seems to have taken a little bit of the back page these days. And now we are dealing with really systemic long-term issues in our society, once again. You know, societies are really like human beings. Obviously, that shouldn't be too profound, since societies are made up of human beings, and it's all human beings who are making choices and decisions. But most of us, you know, we kind of go on through life, stumbling through life, sometimes doing better than other times. Not everything is perfect, but not everything is terrible. It's sort of a balance, and it kind of moves one way and then it moves another way. And even when things, you know, go a little bit out of control, we get a little too angry. We say things we shouldn't say. Our words become a little harsher. Our words actually sometimes can become violent with the intention to do harm. Even when those explosions occur in our personal lives and interpersonal lives, once the fury has passed, and unless we are truly rageaholics, we come back down and we apologize and we say to ourselves and to the others, you know, going forward, I will do better. And I think at the time we do mean it. And in terms of systemic issues in our society, we have been here many times before. Where significant societal issues kind of erupt. And all of a sudden we can't turn away. But the issue will be for us as a society, as a human being, as a person, is am I going to look deeply into this and really commit myself to significant personal transformation, societal transformation? Or will it just be another time of, you know, apologies, statements about I will do better, commissions, people looking into the problems once again, coming up with solutions? Or will this kind of be for real this time? Well, we'll see. I mean, many of us, we have that same issue personally. Again, oftentimes when things kind of erupt in our lives and we see more clearly what's going on, we often, you know, decide, you know, I have to make a change. And there are many areas of our life where we say things like that, and then we may or may not. And we may actually do a lot of reflection and come up with a good plan, but then we don't follow through in it, such as most of us personally have done that, and we have a good plan now. It's called the Buddha Dharma. It's called the Eightfold Path. It's called the 6 Paramitas. It's called many things. So many of us, you know, we've recognized the problem, we have the plan, but what is our problem? Our problem is we're, you know, back and forth, we're in and out, we're consistent, we're inconsistent, and society is the same way. Right? Society is the same way. So, you know, I think for all of us, this is again one of those opportunities when all of a sudden things break open. Once again, they've broken open. They've broken open in the past, historically. And the question for all of us is, are we really going to look deeply, and are we making a commitment to significant transformation? Because this is not a single issue. This is an issue that transcends all the injustices of society, violence. I mean, this is This is historical. This is ancient. It's funny, when I was home this morning thinking about what to talk about, I mean, I was talking about the same thing I was going to talk about last week, but I felt like I needed to address what was going on, because I think it's significant for us as Americans. Interestingly, what came into my mind was, am I my brother's keeper? You know, that biblical, ancient biblical, what? The Old Testament is 5,000 years old or something. You know, Cain slew his brother Abel. And when God asked Cain, where is your brother? Cain said, am I my brother's keeper? I mean, that was 5,000 years ago. That was in a tribe of wandering tribesmen wandering through ancient parts of the world, tribal peoples with their own God, the God of the Israelites, talking to them. And thinking about what's going on today, it's the same issue. Am I my brother's keeper? Am I responsible for what is happening in the world? Am I responsible for violence? And as I think when I read the poetry of Thich Nhat Hanh last week, you know, the virus that just pops up, it's unseen, but it keeps popping up and it spreads. You know, violence is one of the great pandemics in our world. And how can somebody do violence against another human being? Because they've never answered that question. Am I my brother's keeper? And we can't answer that question selectively. Like I am the keeper, I'm the brother of the people who are the victims of injustice. Yes, I am their brother. I am their sister. But the people on the other side, they're our brothers too. They're our sisters too. Do we know that? Do we feel that sense of, I think the Dalai Lama calls it a universal responsibility? Do we really sense that we're all in this together? And the problem is bigger than what manifests in the historical dimension. So again, this is an opportunity once again for society. Again, it's manifested in this very narrow thing it's significant. I mean, of the police and the violence that is being done against African Americans and other peoples. But it's the issue of, 6 months ago, a year ago, the major issue was, a big issue was all this gun violence, right? All these mass shootings. Remember that? We've forgotten that already. We've forgotten that, haven't we? Remember we used to be so concerned about the mass shootings? What are the mass shootings? Violence. People killing people. People harming people. I mean, violence is epidemic in our society. The Buddha showed us another way. His commitment was to create a nonviolent world. He did that by creating within his monastic community a nonviolent world where people lived according to principles of nonviolent, and he shared that with all his lay followers. Do not kill, protect all life. All life. So I would hope all of us, whatever arena we have the ability to affect society, we're not getting just caught up in the particulars of the isms. So many isms. This is a fundamental human problem. The Buddha talked about it. God talked to Cain about it. So, there is another way. Our practice, our teachings shows us another way. And again, I think it's important wherever we are, in our personal life, our interpersonal life. I read last week the poetry of Thich Nhat Hanh, where he was very clear. We need to take out the grenades in our hearts. It's not, the external grenades get thrown and do their destruction because of the grenades in people's hearts. Their angers, their fears. It's anger, it's fear. It's a lack of responsibility and connection to each other. We have to learn how to do this. We have to learn this with ourselves. If there's anybody listening to this talk who still does violence, who talks violently to themselves, who talks hatefully to themselves, who's angry at themselves. If there's anybody listening to this call who still does harm to their own bodies, this is where it begins. We have to become nonviolent people within ourselves. Or how can we demand others become that way? And we have to really see, look deeply. Am I free of anger? Am I free of hatred? Am I free of fear? Or do I still act out from these afflictive emotions, which then cause me to act, talk, relate in that very painful way? The problem with one of the problems of our society is we are so legalistic that we think by, changing the laws, changing the policies, and again, I'm not saying that that's not important, but we think that's significant. In the big scheme of things, that is insignificant if there's not a transformation in humans' minds and a real commitment to living in this new way. So I think those of us in this path, as individuals, those of us in the community, as a collective, those of us in our families, in our neighborhoods, in all the activities, the places we work, all the places we show up, we can all have effects. We're all interconnected. And everybody that we interact with is also interconnected with their field, their mandala of people. So, again, this is an opportunity. There seems to be an opening. Where there's an opening, there's a possibility of new ways of thinking, new ways of looking at things, making a real commitment to change, transformation. And hopefully it will not just be another commission, more words, the passing of laws. Again, not that they're, not helpful. But see if there's a dialogue about looking at creating a true nonviolent world, true nonviolent neighborhoods, true nonviolent cities. And that involves everybody. The perpetrators and the victims. Because victims become perpetrators, and perpetrators become victims. We have to see the big picture of what's going on here. But perhaps I'm just, I don't know, forgive me if this is all very obvious to everyone. So I want to really talk about the way of Bodhisattva, but I want to read two more poems by Thai. I did this last week, and again, I think they're still relevant, and I think poetry says it better than Fred's Sunday morning rants. The first one is called, Please Call Me by My True Names. Probably Thai's most famous poem, but it's Please hear it, for those of you who know it. Please hear it as if you've never heard it, and I will read it as if I've never read it. Please call me by my true names. Don't say that I will depart tomorrow. Even today I am still arriving. Look deeply. Every second I am arriving to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with still fragile wings, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. I am the mayfly, metamorphizing on the surface of the river. I am the bird that swoops down to swallow the mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in a clear water of a pond. And I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks. And I am the arms merchant, selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl refugee on a small boat who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands. And I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people, dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like the spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast it fills the four oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughter at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up and the door of my heart could be left open, the door of compassion. And the other poem, which I think is deeply relevant to these times, it's called The Good News. I don't know how many of you know it. Again, so many wonderful. So I'm reading from Call Me By My True Names, a collective poems of Thich Nhat Hanh. If you haven't taken a look at this in years, or it's new to you, it's Thich Nhat Hanh is a great poet, great Zen master poet. And a lot of his teachings he expresses in poetry. And this is called The Good News. The good news, they do not print. The good news, we do print. We have a special edition every moment, and we need you to read it. The good news is that you are alive, and the linden tree is still here, standing firm in the harsh winter. The good news is that you have wonderful eyes to touch the blue sky. The good news is that your child is there before you, and your arms are available. Hugging is possible. They only print what is wrong. Look at each of our special editions. We always offer the things that are not wrong. We want you to benefit from them and help protect them. The dandelion is there by the sidewalk, smiling its wondrous smile, singing the song of eternity. Listen, you have ears that can hear it. Bow your head. Listen to it. Leave behind the world of sorrow and preoccupation and get free. The latest good news is that you can do it. Good advice for hard times. So, the other thing I want to share with you today is just a little section from The Way of the Bodhisattva by the 8th century great Indian Buddhist master Shantideva. And for those of you who have been attending regularly, you've heard the name Shantideva before in The Way of the Bodhisattva. I think we have our 4th or 5th intensive since our community began, going on for the whole year. I think we have 90 or 100 people in this study and practice of the Way of Bodhisattva, the Way of the Bodhisattva. And again, it's quite wonderful. It has really the 6 paramitas. It has really the incorporation of really the most deepest aspiration of wanting to awake in order to bring a benefit to beings. It is the total integration and interpenetration of wisdom and compassion as one indivisible practice. It is really a profound religious text as well as a Buddhist text. Now, there's an interesting thing that I've always found interesting. In the chapter called Vigilant Introspection, and again, I mean, Shantideva is like big, big issues of practice and meditation and being diligent and vigilant in our minds and mindfulness. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the vigilant introspection, he comes into, well, you'll see it. He comes into just kind of the minutia of everyday life. It's really quite wonderful. I mean, we've been kind of, up to then, a lot of it is kind of this, the spiritual battles of transformation that bodhisattvas participate within themselves in their own transformation. And then in this chapter on vigilant introspection, probably 2/3 of the way through, there's a verse, regard your body as a vessel, a simple boat for going here and there. Make of it a thing that answers every wish to bring about the benefit of beings. So now he's coming, back to the body, and he's, really stating what's traditional view of the body in Buddhism, that it is a vessel. It is the vessel that carries us in this life. It is the vessel that we are born into, and the vessel we live in, and the vessel we will endlessly, at the end, leave. But he says it is only a simple boat from going from here to there. And then he says, make of it a thing that answers every wish to bring about the benefit of beings. And I think I've given talks on this subject matter, so I won't go into it now, but it really epitomizes, as opposed to this kind of narcissistic absorption in our bodies and pleasures and health. I mean, just, again, a certain degree is good. But, we have a body-obsessed culture. And we see it as a vehicle for pleasure or a vehicle for, getting the approval of others or the attention of others. I mean, we see it in many ways. But he says it is really a vessel that we have to bring about the benefit of beings. So I ask you just to reflect on that. What a wonderful way to see my body. to see my health, to see my physical energy. Oh, I have this wonderful vessel. You know, it's really quite wonderful. It speaks, you know. It can say things. It sees, it hears. You know, it's really quite an amazing vessel that we have, right? If you think about it, the complexity of it, it sees, it thinks, feels, right? Smells, tastes. I mean, it's quite a wonderful vessel. What is it for? What do I want to use it for in this brief time that I have it? And for many of us, the brief times when I'm really energetic or I'm still healthy or, you know, I can still use it, I can still get around. Profound question to ask ourselves. You know, how do I want to use this vessel that has been given to me in this life? And then he says, and again, I think this is so important for what we're dealing with because, again, we read the news, we do all these things, and we get consumed with this, you know, these big issues. And we just kind of ruminate, collect more information, more images. And again, as I've said earlier, I think we need to certainly act in a skillful, intelligent, compassionate, wise, nonviolent way. But most of our life, for most of us, are not lived out on a grand scale. Is that true? I mean, most of us, our lives are, you know, we kind of get up and we do what we do during the day. And many of us forget that that really is our life. Whatever the grand schemas of our idealism or whatever, still, our life unfolds day to day, moment to moment, in all the mundane things of life. And oftentimes we overlook that. That's unimportant. And so Shantideva, in the midst of his whole quite grand, eloquent dissertation on the enlightened way of living, he says, be master of yourself and have an ever-smiling countenance. Rid yourself of scowling, wrathful frowns, and be a true and honest friend to all. So let's stop for a minute. I'll stop. I mean, just stop for a moment. To be a master of oneself means what one kind of knows what one's doing, one's self-aware, and one knows how one wants to be. One is the master. If one's the master of themselves, not only are we kind of informing the actions of our body, speech, and mind to move in a certain direction, but we're also aware when it's not, and we are the master. We can make changes. We can send different orders to the servants, so to speak. Be a master of yourself. Have an ever-smiling countenance. Thai often talks about the half-smile practice. You know, are we pleasant to look upon? As we go about our day and we encounter people, are we pleasant? Do we have a smiling countenance? Or do we have a frown? We're looking heavy. We're looking, you know, I mean, we are transmitting a lot in our countenance. When people see us, do they see a smiling countenance, something that would then uplift them? A compassionate countenance, a caring countenance, a loving countenance. Rid yourself of scowling, wrathful frowns, and be a true and honest friend to all. So just stop. How is my countenance during the day? Do I even know? Well, look in the mirror next time. Get a feeling of how your countenance usually is and take a good look. I mean, don't put it on just for the mirror, but just kind of, you know, what is my usual face? And am I a true and honest friend to all? To all, not just those that I pick and choose. So please close your eyes for a second and ask yourself, do I know what my countenance is during the day? Am I committed to ridding myself of scowling, wrathful frowns? And do I really want to be, and have I been, a true and honest friend to all? And then the next one, do not, acting inconsiderately, move chairs and furniture so noisily around. Likewise, do not open doors with violence. Take pleasure in the practice of humility. Very interesting. You know, in monastic training, not so much for lay people, but monastic training, a lot of their training, or some of their training, is what they call comportment. You know, how you comport yourself. And they learn a lot of these kind of things. It's like, because we want to be totally kind of seamless in our actions. And not just in relationship to people, but also in relationship to things, you see. Because the things themselves could be inanimate, but we who are relating to the things, we are not inanimate. And how we are relating to things is very much related to how we relate to the world. So be careful when you move chairs and furniture around. How do we walk? Do we just kind of bang around? It's funny. Or do we walk? Because you see, a lot of times when we're banging around and slamming doors and leaving lights on, and you know, I mean, when I first went to the Zen Center when I was a young man in my 20s, that's really one of the first things we learned, right? To be very aware of what you're doing. One of the first things you learn is when you take off your shoes or you take off your sandals, you're aware of, you know, what you're doing, where you're placing your feet, where the sand, you know, when you want them even to each other. Not because you're obsessive compulsive, because it's awareness, it's mindfulness. We were trained very early on, you know, when you're turning on a light, know you're turning on a light, and when you no longer need that light, you're leaving the room or doing something, turn it off. You are mindful. When you take food, only take food that you're going to eat. You can always ask for seconds, but be mindful of what you're doing. And also, again, the moving of chairs, the opening, closing doors, how we use tools, how we relate it to our cushions. When we take our seat, when we rise, do we fluff them up again? Do we clean them off? It's a kind of way of relating to the things of life. But it shows that we are wakeful. And we understand that these things also have their place. And that all these things have been made by somebody, created by somebody, and support our life. So we are heedful of our actions. Take pleasure in the practice of humility. I think what he's saying here is probably humility is that we're not always trying to, attract attention to ourselves, right? So we move about the world with some degree of humility. We don't need everybody's attention on us, right? So we're not silent, but we're just, I don't know, we're sort of moving through the world with ease. We don't need people to notice us, notice what we're doing. This is Zen saying that says, leave no trace. That's the way the Zen practitioner lives. Leave no trace. Many of us leave kind of a lot of traces. And often we leave a lot of traces because we're not aware that we've left traces. It's not like leaving traces are bad. It just shows that there is a lot of our actions are not, they're started, but they're not finished. We put the dishes in the sink, but we don't wash them. Leave no trace. We put the dishes to be dried, but then we don't put them away when they're dried. Leave no trace. It's a practice. And then he says, herons, cats, and burglars achieve what they attend by going silently and unobserved. Such is the constant practice of a sage. We put ourselves in that category of herons, cats, and burglars. The next one says, when useful admonitions come unsought. Pay attention to this one. When useful admonitions come unsought, from those with skill in counseling their fellows, welcome them with humble gratitude and always strive to learn from everyone. Before I comment, I'll just close your eye and ask yourself, is this the way I am? When somebody gives me a little admonition about my behavior, about my actions, somebody points something out that I'm doing that may not be that skillful, may be negative, or somebody points out, could be another way to do something. And this is not just in terms of your spiritual life, but even in the little things in life. How do we respond? Are we open? Are we grateful? Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out to me. Even if you don't agree with them, you're still thankful that they showed interest in you, that they want to be helpful to you. Thank you. Yeah, I'll take a look at that. So are we open? Or do we always carry the wall of ego? I can't believe that person said that to me. Who are they? Right? Who are they to point something out to me, to criticize me? Can you see the ego that's behind it? The other stance in life is, I'm here to do better. I'm in a process of change and transformation. If somebody points something out to me, I am grateful. And again, whether you actually act on it after considering it is not material. The important thing is the openness, the lack of defensiveness. Do I go through life with the attitude of, thank you, thank you? When we eat our food, thank you. We are grateful to the people who grew it. We're grateful to the people who picked it and transported it. And, we're grateful to the earth. Thank you. Grateful to the teacup for being there to hold my tea. Thank you. Right. Thank you for the people in our life. Thank you for everything. Welcome them with humble gratitude and always strive to learn from everyone. So just take a moment and just reflect on that. Is that our stance in life? I always find that interesting because a lot of people who have trouble taking, what they might call criticism or somebody pointing out to them, are often the people who are the quickest to point out other people's faults. It's kind of humorous. We are a bundle of contradictions. Praise all whose speech is worthy. Say, your words are excellent. And when you notice others acting well, encourage them in terms of warm approval. So this is of the four immeasurables, Buddha's teachings on love, this is the third one, taking joy in the joy of others. We don't just only care about our own speech, but when other people are speaking well, saying nice things, good say, you say, wow, that's really, I like that. It was really wonderful what you just said. Even if they said it to somebody else, not to me, that's wonderful. And when you see others acting well, encourage them in terms of warm approval. We take joy, in Buddhism we say we take joy in all actions that benefit beings. We take joy in all actions that bring happiness to beings. We take joy in all actions that end the suffering of beings. So when we see other people doing that, we should encourage them. We should support them, right? Because we want to see more of it. Praise all whose speech is worthy. Say he even says, even tells us what to do. Your words are excellent. That was very perceptive of you. Even when they're criticizing us. Well, that's really excellent. I missed that completely. Thank you very much. I'll take it under advisement. Oftentimes I'm blind to myself, so I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm even thanking them for criticizing me. I'm encouraging them. Again, this is not, I won't go into it, but anyhow, this is not criticism. This is really, because he says earlier, from those who are skilled in counseling their fellows, which means people who know you, maybe have some insight into you, right? Extol their qualities discreetly. When they're praised by others, praise them too. But when the qualities they praise are yours, reflect upon their skill in recognizing qualities. Very interesting. So sometimes people may be complimenting us, right? You're this or you're that. You're so this, you're so that. And so he says, rather than kind of taking like, oh, isn't that great? It's so nice to be praised, rather than kind of feeding our ego, he says, reflect upon their skill, because it's sort of like if somebody says, oh, that was very kind what you did. You would reflect, oh, this person has the ability to recognize kindness when they see it. How wonderful that they have this ability. Can you see the subtlety of that? It's like noticing that even if they're acknowledging or calling out something positive in you, they can only do it because they have that ability to see it, right? And you want to reinforce that. Yeah, that's great. How wonderful that there are people who aren't critical but are actually seeing positive qualities in others. That must mean they have that in themselves. Let's reward that. Let's reinforce that. Oh, that's really wonderful of you that you have that ability. Rather than going, well, you're absolutely right. I do have these wonderful qualities. You see, it's about them. We want to help others. The goal of every act is happiness itself, though even with great wealth, it's rarely found. So take your pleasure in the excellence of others. Let them be a heartfelt joy to you. There is such, actually, and you remember the poem I read from Thai about good news? There is good news. There is goodness in people. Right? There is goodness in people. I'm sure if you've been attending to the news of what's going on, there's been a lot of goodness in people on all sides. Right? And we see people changing. Right? We see people changing. As society goes through these processes, how wonderful. It's very important that we really learn. Many of us, our radar is set only for what's wrong, what's missing. It's a very skewed radar because when radar is set, it only picks up what it's set for, and we don't even realize that. And many of us have these kind of negative filters that, we are always attending to the negativity of others. What they're doing wrong, not what they're doing right. What they didn't do rather than what they did do. Is that clear? And that's very skewed. So we have to be careful. And I think in our society, that critical judgmental skewedness is very prevalent. And we need to reset our radar, is what he's saying. Let's reset our radar. And for some of us, it's going to have to be manual, you know what I'm saying, until it becomes automatic. It's going to have to be, It's almost like you have to kind of give yourself a task, Actually, in the Kadam tradition, there was a practice where you would use these pebbles, and let's say, white pebbles would be, or black pebbles, doesn't matter what it was, but certain pebbles would be, every time you did something positive, and the deal was you'd have to move them from one pocket to the other, right? So you might start the day putting, I recommend this to people, who feel they have that, wrong setting. You put them, but you can put anything you want, and like every time you say something positive to somebody or you think some positive thought about somebody, you get to move one of those pebbles from one, and, give yourself a challenge. They can get small ones. Maybe you want to move 25 or 50 or 500. That's how we change. We don't just change from good intentions. Good intentions will never stand up to our conditioning. All the way we've been is much more powerful than the way we want to be. So we have to be very practical in how we energize our transformation. So if this speaks to you, try it. It's a wonderful practice. And you can do it for anything or a specific relationship or person, very conscious. And if you want, you can get a little more complicated. You can give yourself demerits, right? Like, so every time you have a critical thought of the person, you have to take one of them back. Put them back. Put them back. It's like those games, where you, anyhow, it's like that. So, anyhow, play with it. Take pleasure in the excellence of others. Let them be a heartfelt joy to you. I mean, in spite of everything, people are basically good, aren't they? And most people do their best, unless they've been too wounded by life, to do things for others, to be kind to others, to be helpful. Please notice that. Speak coherently, appropriately, clear in meaning, pleasantly. Rid yourself of craving, aversion. Speak gently with moderation. Let me leave a little time for taking some questions. Let me just leave this final one, which is so important. When you look at others, think that it will be through them that you will come to Buddhahood. So look on them with frank and loving hearts. This is a fundamental teaching of this Bodhisattva path. Okay? So, when you look at sentient beings, especially the ones that you don't like, especially the ones that are doing things you don't want them to do, remember, it is only because of them that we will attain Buddhahood, that we will develop understanding, compassion, love. There's no other way. How do we become nonviolent people? Only in the face of violence. That's how we learn it. Oftentimes in the face of our nonviolent tendency, that's how we learn it. We develop our capacity to love by having to love people that aren't easy to love. We develop our understanding by really forcing ourselves to understand the causes and conditions that have created this person, created this situation, even when a good part of us doesn't want to do that. We'd much rather write them off as outside the human race. The enemy. We make them the enemy. As Ty said in his poem last week, man is not the enemy. As Gandhi said, great Gandhi said, I think, maybe paraphrasing the Bible, I'm not sure. He said, hate the sin, not the sinner. If you're going to hate something, hate violence, hate intolerance, hate hatred, hate self-righteousness. If you're going to hate. But realize the individual is just caught in that. They're victims too. And they're not happy. They suffer. People who go out of their way to cause suffering to others are not happy people. They suffer. And as bodhisattvas, as people who want to really understand and can be compassionate to all beings, we use these situations and people that are difficult to develop ourselves. So that's why we are grateful to everyone. Especially the ones that give us a hard time, that it's difficult to love, accept, forgive, because that's the challenge. That raises the game for us. Good, so let me stop here, and we have a few minutes. Angie, can you let people chat in? Yes, so again, any questions about what's been shared this morning? Anything not clear how to implement or what's been taught? Please chat it in. There's a chat function at the bottom of your screen. You press chat and you chat something. And Angie is the receiver of the chat, and she will transmit that. And anybody in the room has a question, that's right. I didn't announce, but that we are slowly in the process, following the rest of society. We're slowly in the, in the process of reopening. We have about 12 or 13 people, and we think we can safely, begin to increase that over the coming weeks to maybe 20 or 30, but we'll see. We'll just kind of go slowly. So there are some people in the hall this morning. There will be a few people who will be in the hall during retreat. So any question in the hall or online?
There is a question to Fred. What is the compassionate response when you encounter someone who is completely closed off to kindness and deals with everyone that way? Or what about when someone pushes you to a point when being near them is just consenting for them to berate you and support their warped views through tolerance in their mind?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Yeah, so compassion means to understand the suffering of another being, and two, with intelligence and wisdom, to help if one can. It's very important. It's not, sorry, just a little technical difficulty. So I just had to talk with our camera person. Yeah, so that's a good question, Jude. Again, and this is the crux of it. Rather than responding with anger, rather than responding with hatred, rather than responding in like kind to the person, we understand that they're suffering, and we understand that they are the victim of their causes and conditions. That's what's going on here. Now, on the other hand, it doesn't mean you have to stay there and let yourself be abused. Please understand that, right? I mean, what's going on? I mean, what's going on in our nation right now? People are going, no, we're not going to stand here and be abused, right? We're not going to be treated unjustly, unfairly anymore. Right? See, that's good. That's positive. But it's when we hate, and again, as I said last week, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, I mean, this is their teachings. Right? We cannot become like them, or the world has no hope. We have to in the face of hatred, we have to cultivate love. In the face of violence, we have to cultivate nonviolence. But doesn't mean you don't protect yourself. Okay, it's not like you just open your arms and say, come beat me. Is that clear? So, and again, to remove yourself from a situation that is abusive is the intelligent thing to do, because maybe you've come to the conclusion, there's nothing I can do, like you said. We've thought about it and tried various things and realized, no, this person's just too toxic, they're too blind, they're too whatever, and I need to stay away. That's fine. You never lose your common sense. Yes.
Habits are hard to change. Intentions are a start, but how to really change them is the question.
Yeah, well, that's the issue. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. That's the personal issue for each of us. We all face that. And as a society, which is just a compilation of people, it's the same issue, right? The way we've done things, and that's true for perpetrators as well as victims. For victims to say, I'm no longer going to be a victim, is a big change. Hopefully for perpetrators saying, I'm no longer going to be a perpetrator, that's a big change. But conditioning, in Buddhism we talk about our storehouse consciousness, our karma, where our karma is unfolding for, our conditioning is strong. You're absolutely right. So that's why I was trying to say earlier, our process of changing has to be very conscious. right? We will not change by good intentions. Good intentions can motivate us to change, but we will not change by good intentions. We will not change by just having high aspirations. We will not change by knowing there's a path of transformation and awakening. We will not change by knowing a nonviolent society is possible. It has to be implemented. Again, we are very fortunate as in our tradition that we have a clear path of implementation. We have practices that we can implement. And we have lots of wisdom of wonderful teachers to show us the way. Right? Thich Nhat Hanh, I mean, he's showing us the way. But how many of us follow him? Really? Everybody loves Thai. He's wonderful. But how many people actually follow him, the way he's telling us to live? See, that's a real follower. That we take his teachings to heart. We take his example to heart, whoever you look to in this life. And you make a commitment to implement it. For those of you who attend our morning meditation, every morning at the end of the meditation, we focus on our aspirations and intentions and really set them for the day. And are encouraged to live by them by the day, and the day to evaluate how you're doing. Retool, retrain. This is how you do it. There's a poem or a statement from Patrul Rinpoche that I put up big at retreats. It's said, begin again, start again, fall down, pick yourself up, start again, remind yourself again, recommit again, every morning, it's like, that was his advice. To me, it's the advice we all need to hear. Right? This is the way. And again, it depends on each of us, how serious we are, how sincere we are, and how trusting we are of the path and the teachers, and how much we really want to change. There are many variables that go into change, but the path is clear. Yes. Any other questions, Angie?
Of complimenting people for skillful or kind actions or behaviors, not simultaneously cultivating judgmental mind.
Judgmental mind. You mean like I'm making a judgment that they're doing good? Yeah. That's what I often say to people. A lot of people carry around these narratives in their heads about their life and how terrible they are and what a miserable child they had and all this, And my sense is once you understand that these are narratives, these are stories, that everything past is past, right? So my response to people, but if you're still going to carry a story about your past, why don't you create a good story? It's just a story anyway. Why don't you create a good one, something that supports you? Something that really helps you, go somewhere in your life. So I would say, until your mind is totally free and spontaneously, naturally, only goodness arises on you, that you're a bodhisattva and a Buddha, you've really achieved that, wonderful. But until you get there, if you're going to still have judgments in your mind, have judgments that judge the positive and the good. That's a great step forward for each of us. We have to be practical. As the teaching says, when you're on one shore and you want to get to the other shore, you need a boat, you need a raft. When you're unenlightened and deluded, you need a raft of teachings and practice and teachers and Sangha to get you across to the shore of awakening, to enlightenment. Once you're there, you don't need a boat anymore, do you? You're across. This is a fundamental teaching of Buddhism. All the teachings and practices of Buddhism are what called provisional. They're to help us, right? Help us cross this sea of suffering, the sea of delusion, the sea of birth and death. So, yeah. So we have to work where we are. We have to be very realistic. This is where I am. Right now, I mean, if you're thinking, yeah, right now I got lots of judgment and they're 99% negative or 75% negative or whatever, or my conversations with myself or about myself and other people are mostly negative. Yeah, we need to change that. Wonderful if you can get rid of, if you think you're capable of getting rid of all your judgments, wonderful, do that. But if you're kind of a little humble and you realize, no, I gotta take what is and transform it. Like every time it's like with the pebbles, every time something good, I move it, something bad, I gotta move it back. It's like you make a little practical way to move us along. We have to move ourselves along this path. And so for many of us to say, yeah, every time I make a negative judgment, have a negative thought about somebody, I will immediately provide the antidote, the opposite. That's my commitment. I mean, you could put pennies in your pocket. There are people who like little candies. You could put little candies in your pocket. Chocolates, whatever you like, lollipops, just keep. Anyhow, do we have time for any more? That's it. Good. We've come to the end. So thank you very much.